So welcome everyone. This is the third Amplifying Her Voice Global Virtual Summit, and we are so delighted to be presenting from the island of Bermuda this time. And this happened impromptu, and because our summit is virtual, we were like, why not? We'll just stay on the island and run it from here, and it's worked out really well. Really grateful to the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation for giving us their offices to host this awesome event. And this is our second day. And we are very much looking forward to partnering with them again in the fall when we run our upcoming summits. And wanted to basically invite everybody who's watching right now to the Empathy and Artificial Intelligence session that we're going to have some awesome guests joining us today. Brian Feinberg, Ben Bland, Lubna Dajani, Dan Mapes, Aaron Duda. These are some outstanding people, professionals in the industry, and we'll be hearing from their different perspectives on why this space is so crucial, especially as we architect this new normal. Brian, why don't you introduce yourself? And if you want to introduce Plato, just jump right in while we wait for Aaron and Dan. That'll give me a chance to sync with them and see if they can log on.
Thanks, Anu, and thank you, everybody, for letting us be part of what I think is going to be a really interesting panel. You know, we all have a responsibility in a way on the applications that we're building to drive humanity across the different ways that artificial intelligence is being used. It's almost a sacred responsibility that we have as developers to be able to kind of deliver that, and kind of one of the reasons why we built Plato. So to try to put some things in context, we're going to do a short little video. And then on an introductory level, I'm the founder of Plato Technologies. We're a vertical data search engine and intelligence platform that focuses on today's innovation sectors.
Welcome, Dan. We see you now. So great to have you.
Great to see you.
Yep, always. And Aaron's on his way. He's here now. Yes, awesome. Hi, Aaron.
Hello.
Hey, Aaron.
Brian's going to jump into his presentation on Plato, and we're going to dive right in. So welcome. We haven't missed anything.
Excellent. So what we're going to look at is our blockchain vertical, but we, again, have applied this across 28 different market sectors, across 23 different languages.
Introducing Plato Blockchain by Plato Data Intelligence.
Can you make it bigger?
Yep.
Plato's data intelligence platform unlocks the power of vertical search across today's most active technology sectors. We've created an ultra-secure, smart, and intuitive environment that provides real-time data intelligence in an immersive, content-rich environment. Plato provides a deep and authentic content.
Mute yourself, Brian.
Innovative technology sectors and advanced machine learning. Plato's engine curates the
And you might want to run it again. The mute button killed the video. Let's try one more time. Unmute yourself.
I don't have to, but I appreciate the opportunity. And if you go to platoblockchain.com, you can see the video in all its glory. It does represent something important to us, that after 3 years of development, here we are with a groundbreaking technology that did things on an ethical level. And we have responsibility not only as data scientists and bankers and venturists, but really, how do we connect with this information that A, we can trust, and two, how does it help inspire this next generation of innovators that is so much part of the culture behind artificial intelligence, right? It's not always about just breaking ground. It's about how do we connect with people and how do we create automation across that environment. So I'm happy to be here, Anu. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And that's it.
Awesome. Wonderful. We've got you, Aaron. Now that we have you on video, why don't you introduce yourself? the goal of today is to talk about empathy and artificial intelligence as we design systems going into the new normal, why this is so critical and crucial. So just jump in a little bit with your background and why this is so relevant today.
Sure. Hey, Brian, thanks for showing us the demo. I would encourage everybody to take a look at it because it really is an embodiment of, where I think, part of my story is, coming from people that, trying to fit into society from a refugee environment to, having the opportunity to do some very interesting things later in life. And in that evolution, it was always about integrating people and culture and information, and then science and technology obviously played a big part in my life to contribute back to that problem set. And I think over time, what happened is that we've, thought through the things that were logically what made sense to us. We codified that into mathematics or languages or other things to program, intelligence into, what we call compute and other things, right? But somehow or another, we took the emotion away from it, and I don't know where we lost that, but that kind of comes and hides itself in many different manifestations of topics as it relates to science and feelings and in humanity. So I think in Brian's case, one of the things that in my collaboration with him that I always wanted to put on the forefront was the notion of, ethical business and going back to the roots of and anthropology of, on one side, as we think about business in the digital construct, how businesses will be organized and how the role of people and the planet and the next generation of assets or properties will play into that in the dynamics. We need to go back to, on one side, you have, these pirates, or we would call privateers of the back days of colony. And on the other side, you would have these merchants and who would, migrate and traverse the world across cultures and so forth, and go from places like Persia to India and things like that, right? And so both of those communities over at least the last 500 to 2,000 years that we looked at it very closely in thinking through some of where we would like to contribute as we move into the future is really the empathetical aspect of what is commerce and trust, and how does one get through the unknowns in these unknown territories, and how does it manifest itself digitally? And then the topic of AI and those things become secondary and tertiary effects, not the learning side, the application side. So anyhow, that's the context from which I'm looking at the topic.
Fantastic. And now I want to introduce a dear friend of mine, Sensei, Dan Mapes. If you could please share a little bit about your background, sir, and tell us about, how this relates to the work that you're doing with Versus.
Sure. So we have two fundamental technologies that are coalescing. One is a very advanced AI coming out of University College London called active inference AI, as opposed to the typical neural nets with big data sets that we've been using for the last decade. So this is based on work from Dr. Carl Friston, who's kind of considered the leading neuroscientist in the world, probably up for a Nobel here in the next year or two. Active inference AI could also be considered contextual AI. And so it's kind of aware of its surroundings. It functions more a little bit like Jarvis, where it's an augmentation to human intelligence. And we're actively developing that technology right now. And that is embedded in another set of technologies that are called the spatial web, SPATIAL. You can look it up, the spatial web, brought about by Versus Technology. So the spatial web kind of creates, instead of a web of pages, which we have now, we have a World Wide Web of web pages, HTTP. We now, because of technology and the advancement of chip speeds and network speeds, we can now have a web of spaces. And so what we're starting to see is smart cities making digital copies of themselves, factories, supply chains, ports, airports, and ultimately we're going to cover the entire surface of the planet with digital spaces, and that creates something that Buckminster Fuller called the world game. So the world game then allows us to manage the planet, our carbon footprint, our supply chains, other kinds of things more effectively in partnership with AI. But it needs this new kind of active inference AI combined with the spatial web. And now you get something called the world game, which really will allow us to address the UN sustainability goals more effectively than we've been doing to now. So you can go to our website, www.verses.io. There's a lot of information there. You can also, I wrote a book called The Spatial Web, if you want to dive into that. And you can look into active inference AI. These three things will kind of give you the tools that we're using to address smart cities and other kinds of things that will cause development in the future.
This is something that, you know, Dan has been working on since a couple of years, since we met, like back in 2017, maybe even earlier than that. But it was one of these things where we had been talking about the future before it was when it was the present back in those days. And it's been an evolution, just like what you've been doing, Brian, with your work with Play-Doh. Dan, and I've seen him in the trenches and watched this thing unfold over time. And it's been such a global adventure. We've traveled the world together as he's been building Verses, and so great to see the culmination, especially now in this pandemic time. So it's so great to see where this evolution has come and where it's going from here. You're just starting something, you know this, and I've seen like the reports from Deloitte and elsewhere, like they've now picked on, and you are the architect of this. So it's fantastic to have you with us here today. And I will also share that Dan has been one of our greatest supporters, just like Aaron and Brian and Lubna as well. Then you're going to be a part of this tribe after today. But we talk regularly. Out of all of them, Dan's been, you know, one of my oldest supporters, and Aaron, very deep supporter, and Brian as well. And so great to have these amazing men who are fathers as well supporting us. This is in honor of Father's Day. We honor you. I'm so glad you're here. You have no idea what it means to me. Yes, yeah. Champion. Thank you. And what's interesting is when I first got started in blockchain and AI, Dan and I were at lunch. We met randomly, and he said, "Do you know what this is?" And I said, "Not really." And he goes, "Well, you're going to be in it, and I can see, you know, where this is all headed." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll call you when I need you." And he goes, "You will be calling me soon." And it's so great to see you here, and you know, in this time, it's just amazing. And the last time we saw each other was in Davos before everything erupted. So what we're going to dive into today, love to hear more about, you know, where this evolution has come. Also, your work with the divine feminine. Our audience would love to hear more about that as well. So I'm going to shift the conversation since Lubna wanted to go last. Normally women want to go first, but Lubna wanted to go last. Ben, jump in, please, and tell us a little bit about your background, what you're working on in this topic, how it relates.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here. And it's nice to be part of a new tribe. That's very exciting. Okay, so I have a very broad background in digital across kind of marketing and strategy and things like that over 20 years. But the last 5 years, I was running operations at a small tech company here in Belfast in Northern Ireland, specializing in empathic technology. So technology is designed to measure and infer human emotions from a whole wide range of biometrics, you know, on and off the body, and then to try and help design systems that would then respond to those. And we did that for some of the world's biggest brands like Red Bull and Volvo and people like that at a kind of experimental and experiential kind of level. And then in the sort of middle of that time there, ended up almost by sort of luck, being asked to chair the newly formed working group at the IEEE, Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, to form one of their new family of global standards in ethics in AI. So this one specifically relates to empathic technologies, you know, technologies that measure and respond to emotions. And we're now just about to enter our third year as a group. We're still fighting over exactly how this standard will manifest and how the extent to which we can kind of mandate how systems designers should operate and how much we have to kind of leave it open because it's such a new and emerging field. And then lastly, I'd say through all of that, empathy in a broader sense, especially in the context of technology, but much more broadly, to me is just kind of underlies so much. I think it's a superpower, and it can be used for a great deal of harm, but also could be the kind of key for us as a species to actually truly engage with each other and work out how we move into a new phase of our existence and with this planet, coming with us. I'll stop there.
Fantastic.
Ben, we should talk. We have John Havens from IEEE on our board, and we're working actively with IEEE on ethics in AI. So let's follow up after this and talk.
Yes.
Beautiful. I think
John,
all of the people that are on this, like, there's just so many synergies. I see it, like all the connection points. And Dan, I called you the other day from my car and said, we're going to have a meeting with Erin about the work that we're doing with Sheconomy. And we've been talking about this forever. Brian just issued a press release on Plato blockchain for us today, Dan. And we had 94 newswires pick it up. I'm going to forward them to you. So we're like all over the planet right now. And this was all done through his artificial intelligence algorithms. And honestly, just like so many integrations that are happening. This is just the beginning. Lubna, please tell us about some of the work that you're doing in this space. You are one of the pioneers, one of the leading Arab women. And I saved you for this panel. I didn't put you on anything else because I'm like, this is the most important thing and wanted to have your full attention. So dive in and tell us, where we are and where we're headed, please.
Well, thank you. So just a little bit about myself. So I come from a systems background, and my interest is in innovation and technology, up and down the technology stack, and how it applies to the experiences we create for humanity and planetary well-being. I started out in AI in a very early day, much earlier, some of the earliest days of my own career. So it's been close to like some 30 years or so. I was delighted to go last. I always like to hear what everybody has to say, but certainly honoring you gentlemen and in your support of us women in technology and for Father's Day. Thank you, Anu, for having this event and for all that it represents. You're speaking of John Havens. John Havens is also an old friend of mine. He used to, I used to be the founder, or was the founder of Mobile Monday in New York, which was probably one of the very first events that promoted future thinking, ubiquitous web, the integration of communication and compute, and the whole world of IoT and all that comes from being connected. I've authored a paper called The Alternet, which is it was a chapter in a book on future cities, and the impact of when all people, places, and products are connected, aware, and addressable, and how that changes the way we interact and the multiplier effect when we have that, when the whole population, the whole world is your sample size. And actually, in it talks about a lot of the things that we're talking about now, how important data is, and therefore your identity. So you'll find me oscillating up and down the technology stack. I've been involved in women's technology and women innovation, and I'm really glad to see that so many of us are starting to come in and have more work in this space, and particularly empathic AI. And why empathic AI? I'm also part of the 7,000 series, and John leads that effort at IEEE. 7010 looks at the effects of. It's an assessment of the impact and effect of AI and autonomous systems on human happiness and well-being, so to speak. And you should definitely check it out because writing with guidance and tools. And I drive Ben crazy in the empathic AI, the 7014 standard, and we would love to have all of your participation. You folks should come in, everybody else that's in our audience. Empathic AI is immensely important, whether you call it emotional AI, empathic AI, or what have you. It is, to me, it is the bridge between the man and machine. It is extended. It's where we define how we tie our own pathways and our own neural networks, our own thinking, and that of the machine. It is where we bridge ourselves from being, I say, Homo sapiens to Homo sapiens. And empathy or psychology really as well, it's understanding the emotion, because we are taking, when we talk about empathic AI, we're talking about taking data from all sources around you as an individual, and as a society, as a being, and then assessing it and mapping it to understand your emotion, to understand or to interpret how you feel and what you think, so that we may, in reality, primarily the applications of it, regardless of which vertical, is how to influence your decisions, your investments, and your behavior. It is also to give you the feeling or the impression that the bots or the AI systems or the autonomous systems that we are creating are compassionate to you, that they understand you, that they are hearing you. And then that has enormous applications, obviously, and very, very significant implications. And that's where the fine double-edged sword exists, in my opinion. And we can talk more about cognitive AI and all sorts of other potentials. But my hope is that we also start, and Ben knows I drive him crazy about this, that we start working together, all of us, on utilizing the technology and that we are creating to help us better understand ourselves, to Dan's point and to Aaron's point and everyone's point and earlier, and how do we become better humans and create a better quality of life for us. And I talk about, everybody's heard me, probably Anu's heard me enough times talk about moving us from the humankind that we have demonstrated ourselves to be to the kind human that we were created to be. It's just a simple binary shift. And I believe AI and its family can help us.
And you can see how if you can mute everyone if you're not speaking, so we don't have echoes. You can see how passionate Lubna is about this space. Like she's the reason why we're having this panel in the first place. And you can just yes, absolutely. And there's just so much to this conversation because it's affecting all of us. It's affecting our children. And honestly, you need people who are thinking through this correctly. And it's so great to have the three dads on the bottom. And Lubna, you've got a daughter also as well. And Ben, you probably, are empathic as well, to have a strong feeling towards this. But it's
I was going to say I played mom and dad, but that's another story.
Yeah. So it's really great to see the direction that we're taking, especially now in the pandemic, where we're becoming more mindful of the technology that we design, why we design it, who it's for, how it's going to be used. And I think all of you know by now, I'm super passionate about refugees, super passionate about women, and having people like Lubna who understand the perspectives of women from the Arab world also has just been such a blessing. Dan, you and I have talked about this. This is more than the tech. It's the humanity that connects you and I from day one, from inception. And Aaron has been such a very strong mentor, and he understands ultimately that all of the work that we're doing collectively, all of the partnerships ultimately have to reach that demographic that really doesn't have access to this tech or designing this tech. They never would. So we really have to be thinking in that frame of mind. How do we bring these forces into equilibrium, right? And as creators, you can do that. And we are the creators. We're sitting right here on the screen, and to have that communion, so to speak, like we're all like drinking from the same one mentality of making this tech more equitable, making this tech more fair, and ultimately more accessible. And so let's dive into this. Like, what tech have you seen that inspires you? That's other than your own, obviously, or if you want to talk about how you have like proactively taken an interest in making your tech more equitable, more fair, more empathic. Do you want to start with this, Dan? I'll let you, because you're in creative mode right now. Go ahead. Unmute. Unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, absolutely. It's so the reason, one of the reasons that I'm deeply involved in it is it was obvious to me. I studied artificial intelligence in grad school at Berkeley, and it was obvious to me that AI was coming, whether we like it or not. So we should get right in the middle of it and bring as much ethics to it as we could. And that's led to a lot of the work we're doing. And so we've surrounded ourselves, and we'll obviously work with Ben and Lubna on the IEEE work as well. And I look forward to meeting you, Aaron, and Brian as well, and conversing about it all. But really, I think it's for communities to come together and bring the highest ethics we can to the application of these extremely powerful technologies. AI, I mean, we look at the development of tools by humanity for the last couple 100,000 years, or even 500,000 years. I mean, from fire to spears to agriculture to industrialization. But the most advanced technology we've ever invented is artificial intelligence. And so it has the potential to do great, wonderful things in terms of reaching the UN sustainability goals. Has the potential to do horrible things. It can lead to a dystopian future, as many of our movies have shown us. And so the way we're going to bend that arc toward the positive is by conversations like this, and working together and bringing our best knowledge together, and then coding it and encoding it into the system. So that's really what we're doing actively. And you can do things also by adding layers of things like self-sovereign identity. So that right now we're logging in to everything on the current internet, and that means every move you make is tracked. We're creating a new internet now called the spatial web, and in the spatial web, everyone has self-sovereign identity. So you own your own data. Wow, that's huge. There's no logging in the spatial web. There's zero knowledge proofs. Right now, if you go to a nightclub, you have to show your ID, and it has your name, your address, everything. I mean, that's way too much information. They just need to know that you're over 21. And so with self-sovereign identification, you can have zero knowledge proofs, which means as you walk up to the club, there's just a green check mark in augmented. Yeah, this person's over 21. You go in, they don't have to know your name, anything like that. So we can have a lot more privacy, a lot of data privacy. We own our data, these kinds of things, so that the AIs are not really tracking our every move and these other kinds of problems that come along with that, even in the current web, even without AI. So those are some things we're doing. We're building a lot of guardrails and other kinds of protective devices, almost like putting airbags into a car. Cars are great, but going through the windshield is not so great. So having seatbelts and airbags are really valuable. So there's things we can do as we're employing these technologies to protect ourselves from them.
And alluding to that, you want to jump in, Lubna? You're on mute again. You're on mute, love.
It's okay. I was going to say, now that's 7012, the personal data and 70. But I'm going to stop talking about the 7000 series. But it's interesting how to go ahead and talk about how we actually ensure that. How do we get past our own biases in assessing bias? But I will let you continue. I was just.
So Dan was one of the original. Back in the day, he got his PhD in artificial intelligence, for those of you who are listening and watching from all over the world. And what I will say is the conversations that I attended during the UN General Assembly just 2 years ago, there were meetings with the World Health Organization right before the pandemic. Again, this whole conversation of health for all. How do you achieve health for all? You have to have artificial intelligence. You need this data. So this conversation started, and right as, this was September 2019 or October 2019, when they had the UN General Assembly, they were saying this is our top priority. And then look what happens. Just 5 months later, we have pandemic. So yes, there was this, we need this, we have to have this. And now it's a question of how can we go forward as a human race without it, right? So ultimately, it's so timely, and it's not just for health, it's also for education. Like if you're going to have education for all, anything where you have all this data out there, you do need that. You do need that artificial intelligence. Why? Because we need to understand what these people need, what they're using, not using, and we can't move as fast as humanity needs us to without artificial intelligence. But with that in mind, we also have to have these protective measures. So I'm curious, Aaron, what are your thoughts on the tech that Dan is building in terms of, you know, how we make this more empathic for humanity?
Well, you know, I haven't read the book yet, Dan, but I should. Harry Clore tells me I should, so I should. You know, listen.
Yeah, Harry's wonderful. He's on our advisory board. Yeah, we really appreciate his input. Yeah.
Harry and I go back to the X Prize days, way back when, and so you know, he's always been a brother and a partner in crime and crazy thoughts, you know. But you know, the thing here is that, you know, I go back to like my early AI days in early 80s, and this is the MIT camp of Patrick Winston and those folks, right? But I was also heavily involved with, you know, DoD and protocols, you know, which is like what TCP/IP and fixed Ethernet and stuff like that. And then if you look at the particle physics angle of that and how you design those systems and the craft by which you think about, you know, we were building trusted systems in those days and trusted hosts, right? Thinking that we could share stuff in a quasi-utopian outlook, you know? And then we started to share documents across multiple, you know, different ponds, right? I could share from university to university. We send the first message from, let's say, Berkeley to, you know, UCLA. And I know our friends in UCLA will always brag about that. My friends in Berkeley always says, no, that wasn't the message, but it was. And when you can prove that it was, and then you can historically go back and have a way to remember and codify that, you know, the early AI stuff, you know, beyond knowledge engineering and the basic mathematics and predicate calculus really didn't give us much of an outlook and an approach to solve difficult problems. It gave us basic pattern matching and clustering analysis and so forth from a mathematical point of view, right? Yeah. Now let's fast forward, right? So you go from there. So I was one of the first guys to bring that kind of notion into Wall Street in the late 80s at Salomon Brothers, looking at pricing of securities and so forth, which evolved into mathematics called the yield book. But what happened was by that time, Silicon Valley already started building things from Lisp to other languages to platforms to, you know, knowledge engineering toolkits to UI toolkits, like let's say Nextbird Objects is an example. Yeah, some might remember that. And what happened was we never delivered in AI, okay? What it always was sold to and whatever the benefits were, it never delivered in my mind. So I've watched 35 years go by. And then all of a sudden, one day I wake up and AI becomes a noun and a verb and an adverb, okay? So I just, you know, I hope that we use this in how we, you know, think about building the next set of economies and the planet and people inside of that. We understand whether it's a biological system or whether there's any other systems that we haven't defined, or, you know, we include the notion of the interrelationships and the complexity of layers as we can't even agree upon what AI means today. Okay. So I think we have a bigger problem than setting standards with our friends in IEEE and ACM and others. Then we just got to get the communication and get some proof points, because on many aspects, Anu, I do agree with you in your outlook on where AI plays a role in the future. But I know how you define it because I've spent enough time with you to know the context. Yeah. But I wouldn't be able to generally make that statement. You know what I'm saying? And I know how, you know, we look at empathy from Brian's angle, because, you know, I'm the same guy who tells my friends at Berkeley, you know, Burnt and those guys, you know, show me how you can make a robot cry, right? That was 15, 20 years ago with Kurzweil and those guys, you know. But then you realize if you make a robot and train it and put some special water pumping device on the eyes and make them read every emotional card from Hallmark, you can train that robot to cry, right? So, you know, we as human beings still have the creativity, you know, to solve such problems. And I think we define problems without understanding the practice sometimes. And my fear right now is in the last 2-3 generations, I find of innovators and inventors, entrepreneurs, people like us, and unlike us, people who we serve and serve it to from our practice, that we've left a knowledge base and an understanding behind. And how do we actually apply the tools of the trade? And so I'm kind of focused on 2 generations above me, 2 below me. And when I find a synopsis, if you will, of the meaning of AI very quickly, I'm going to start plugging into every places I know that I can apply it, right? So I'm just as curious right now. I know what our solutions for that is, and I know empathetically at the core that, I've seen the work we've done in stem cells 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I've seen the work that we've done in cloning and so forth, and the ethical issues. I think is much easier to compromise ethics and conduct digitally than any other deep science I've ever looked at. And I'm frightful that not only have we created that mess from when I worked on the initial, NSF and ARPANET and MILNET 20, 30 plus years ago, to where we are today in many manifestations of that model that in one case, has classic mitosis, in the other case, classic meiosis. And we're inventing 5 new internets right now, right? For certain conditional aspects of how we want to generate experience of the future. So someplace in the middle, I think there's a way for me to start to think about how to contribute to that problem set. Until that point, we're just like all of you guys, we're just running towards what we believe is right and hoping we'll find each other along the way.
Yep. And that's the world I live in, Aaron, just the hope and the possibility. And I know there's all this other complexity, which all of you like super smart people understand. But for the common person, it's there is a promise and there is a potential, and let's all hope that we're all heading in that right direction. Lubna or Ben, do you guys want to jump in here, like from what Dan and Aaron were discussing? Do you want to build on that?
I can make a quick comment. Yeah, although that stuff's there's some big points being made.
Yeah, big points, exactly.
But for some of the conversations we've had around the sort of ethics standards group, and also from what I've seen, trying to build kind of systems that do this kind of measurement and response thing with human affect. So I think first of all, like in terms of there's things like defining what we mean by AI in the first place, as you say. And then when we add on this layer of kind of human emotion and that sort of emotional level interaction between people, there's also a massive gap in people's understanding of the actual science behind it and how little agreement there is in the first place. We were just talking about this just this week about how like even how we define an emotion is something that hasn't actually been agreed on yet. So you're talking about psychology, which is a relatively young science. And then the science of emotions on top of that, which is still a very kind of nascent and earlier stage. So I think part of the education and agency that we want to be able to give to people who engage with these systems is actually so that they don't actually assume too much intelligence in the system in the first place. And then to add to that, what I've seen, which I think shows a lot of promise for these kind of systems, is where like we were doing some experiments with like a super early stage kind of prototype that was kind of mostly measuring. It wasn't really doing anything else. But we were asking people to who involved in the experiment to constantly log how they were feeling and answering a few questions about that, so we could compare their subjective thoughts about their own feelings at that point in time with what the system was measuring. And the thing that came out of that was most exciting was that when you spoke to people after the experiment, the main response you got from them was, "I've never thought about my emotions that much or in that way." And so I think that these systems we're building, if they're designed in the right way, they can help people to understand themselves on a kind of non-conscious level that they never even realized. And that'll be okay and that'll work if they do it in a way where they admit to like all their limitations, and they also show what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to influence how they're trying to influence the person. And then also ask for that feedback, because if you as the user, no matter what sort of level of kind of education you have, whatever, feel that you're like, okay, right now you think I'm angry. Well, actually, I'm not angry. I'm trying to cover up for something that's happened elsewhere, whatever. You basically tell the system when it's right or wrong. That feedback loop is basically the ultimate kind of annotation set you could ever dream of. And then add to that Dan's point about doing it in a kind of highly kind of private, self-sovereign kind of way. And I think we have potential for systems that actually make us more emotionally intelligent. I don't really like that term very much, but that kind of idea.
It's better than what we. No, you want to jump in here?
No, I said to Ben, that's Anora. Anora is about making us emotionally intelligent, about intelligence about our own selves as a hybrid being, and even to reconnect our physiology and our psychology, because we have through culture, through socioeconomic drivers, and through pharma, really, and a lot of medications. To the extent that we've been burned some nerves to stop pain, but pain is a language, one of the languages that the body uses to communicate amongst itself, between the sensors and the endpoints and the brain. So we've covered a lot of things. The gentlemen have talked about a lot of things, like self-sovereignty is also an essential component, and digital identity in particular, and the use of blockchain to and distributed ledger technologies to facilitate self-sovereignty in a digital sense, with zero knowledge proofs and all the things that W3C work that we've done, or in that space or in privacy space. What is important, and it was, I think, to a point that Ben made, is to know what your own point A is, because we're all standing at our point A, saying we're standing at point A. But we're all standing, even when you're at a race and you're all lined up next to each other, running to the finish line. You all see the finish line, it's the same finish line. But even when you're standing side by side, touching each other, if you will, you're still standing on your own point A. And your point A and my point A is still not exactly the same, even if we think it is the same. So the idea of having a common taxonomy and language and all that becomes critical to the success of any particular a transdisciplinary really approach to this, because this is what we are really at the end of the day. It's applying technology up and down the stack. So it's the thing when you bring artificial intelligence or machine learning, deep learning, you put on top of that, you apply that together with AI and then nanotechnologies, and they'll go other innovation up and down the stack. And how that affects humanity is that's when very serious implications and impact can happen. What is important, I think, is to be, as I think, at least as I understood Ben, is to know your own moral compass and your own point A, and what you are defining as right or wrong. What is ethical and what is not, and then how do you then be able to? It's only with that you'll be able to step outside of yourself and be able to measure or determine. Also, whose perspective? We talked about perception and response. So it's how you perceive it, and then how you choose to, or action. How do you choose to react to something, and how we choose to use the information is very important. But to recognize also the patterns of our own biases and interpretations. And that goes in the code, which is and in the data. And I liken AI, for those who to a newborn. A newborn is made of the DNA of its parents. That's like I say, that's the code. So the biases in the DNA of your parents is what is like biases in the code, and then the social norms, the cultures, the things that we're telling ourselves and our children are right or wrong, good or bad, can do and cannot do, possible and impossible. These are like the data sets, so to speak. So we need to re-examine all of that and re-examine where we want to take humanity and society, now that we have the capacity to extend our own ability to decipher a cause and effect, and our own ability to project and to manifest a future. So it's really
what we have here is the power to rewrite humanity, right, Lubna?
That is right. That is. You're so eloquent.
Well,
I love you.
If I may add, just as much as there's a technology stack, there's also a human API stack as well at multiple layers. So
Yes.
I think the trade-off is always going to be when we deal with ethics and moral and conduct, okay, where in one side, there's the gray area of having empirically driving data to a conclusion versus a conclusion driving for the instrumentation, okay? So that's the binary state of human behavior right now, okay? And so what happens is either we do it with intent or we do it without intent, and we learn what intent means, okay? And that's where I think if we focused our AI to understand that, just that small use case and how the human mind works in making that decision, and if somebody can prove it on this call, how to make that each and every time based on changing the environmental factors about it, so hold that constant, I think we can start to have a meaningful discussion where we think about forecasting, planning, scheduling, analytics that look at options and things like that. But I think, we have to look much deeper into the substrate and look at the basic symbology, because I think the mathematics could be incorrect here. And I also think the language and the information set and the approach by which we, dimension problems of the past, the notion of dimensioning the problem is where I think we're losing that artisan, and we're, codifying stuff, and we're replicating the pedagogue, and we're building scale, not skill. Okay. So that's the hypothesis I would say I need to kind of figure out that problem, because I'm having a lot of difficulty otherwise in how I think about my own conclusions, right, in our business, and how we can contribute, because we're just frustrated. We think we could do it better with greater scale, but we also think that we have, a little bit of skill, that we have a lot to learn, and there's plenty of skill that is not showing up on our radar. So we want to kind of cross tribes.
It's micro scale. I know you have to organize a workshop for this one.
You
Next one, yes.
Though, right? But
we got
it's
it.
grounded
Absolutely.
on real practice, right? It's grounded on real practice.
Exactly. No, I completely, and we forget, I think, Ben, you shared one about Canon and the smile thing, and before you can go into the office, having to maybe, I think maybe it's a gimmick by Canon. I think it would be, if it were a marketing gimmick, that would be a brilliant marketing gimmick too, because it's about a smile, and maybe it's not implemented that way, but it's gotten all of us talking about Canon again. I mean, I probably the stock has gone up. But
you want to jump in?
Well, I also like to look at history. I mean, we can learn a lot by looking backward to see where we might be going forward. Human beings have, modern human beings like us, Homo sapiens, have been on the planet for around 250,000 years. And for 90% of the time, we really lived in the Stone Age. And we were hunter-gatherers. And then somewhere along, maybe about 8,000 years ago, we discovered agriculture. Before that, we do go out every day and look for food. And with agriculture, we figured out, oh my gosh, one seed produces many seeds, and we can have large plots of land dedicated to growing food. And we got fruit abundance. It was amazing. First time in 200,000 years, food abundance. And so that we call that era the agricultural era, the agricultural age. And then with Gutenberg's printing press, we discovered how do we get abundance of things, because things were very expensive. Only royal families and big institutions like the Vatican had wealth. Average people just grew food and ate it, but really didn't have any things. And with Gutenberg, he said, well, if you make thousands of things at a time, the price per item comes down very low. And so now we've been in the industrial age for the last few hundred years. And now we have lots of things, so many things that we're filling up our ocean with things. And we're throwing away more things than we use. So we've got abundance of things. Now, the latest discovery, and I think Aaron alluded to it, we discovered protocols. And protocols create a new kind of abundance. The first protocol that really is impacting us was the Internet Protocol back in 1970, which became TCP/IP. And it gave every machine an address and a protocol for the machines to communicate with each other. And the killer app of that was email. And so we grew from 4 computers there in that first test to 40 million computers 25 years later. We're up to 40 billion computers today, and we're about to put 400 billion IoT devices on the internet. So what did we discover there? Something really remarkable. Open protocols that are not owned by a company, but are delivered by IEEE and become universal standards, they create decentralization. Anybody can use the protocol for free. Decentralization creates exponential growth. Exponential growth leads to abundance. Then we made a protocol. Oh, well, that works. And then 25 years later, Tim Berners-Lee said, oh, I've got another protocol. Let's give every document an address. And we'll make a protocol to link all the documents. That became the World Wide Web. And again, we went from eight documents in 1994 to 8 billion documents today. Little companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Yahoo, many thousands of others have developed $20-30 trillion worth of market cap. Wow. Abundance of information, abundance of commerce, abundance of wealth. Wow, amazing. Now our company's just developed a new protocol called HSTP, which is like HTTP, but that's hypertext transfer protocol. That's all we could do in 1994 was transfer text across the network. Now we can actually do computer gaming at scale globally, and we can turn the entire world into a giant computer game. And so we've created the hyperspace transaction protocol. And what that's done now, it's linking up with blockchains, which is another protocol, and things like Bitcoin and others. And we're about to create abundant wealth, abundant money, abundant experiences, abundant education, new kinds of abundance that are going to come in on the planet. So we are about to enter the age of abundance. We're leaving the age of scarcity. So. We're entering the age of abundance. Now that we still need ethics. We still need to bring all the care we're bringing to it. But these protocols, combined with decentralization, combined with exponential growth, do cause, in the way that we discovered that one seed of corn creates 1,000 kernels. Plant 1,000 kernels, now we got 1 million kernels of corn. We can feed everybody. So we are discovering the algorithms of abundance. And I think Aaron really put his finger right on it. The algorithms of abundance in our time are digital. And we're creating digital abundance. That's going to lead to a global education for free for everybody on the planet, lifelong. That's going to create a new kind of wealth. We're already seeing it with cryptocurrencies exploding. And that's going to change our world completely. I mean, we are in the middle of a giant transition. And maybe this is Renaissance. This might be Renaissance 2.0. The last Renaissance.
I think so, Dan. I actually think this is a new Renaissance, but this is a global Renaissance, okay? Where when we did the internet stuff back
digital Renaissance, Aaron.
Yeah, it is. Well, I'm going to get to that because I think, I'm fortunate I got to, take the journey from the beginning, and it's clearly not the end yet because this is my third try of coming out of retirement, so I'm not done. And so the thing is, look, I remember putting the first PCs together to go against, the PC maker of the day at that time, right? And learning chips from breadboarding. So I was one of the heat kit babies, okay? Building ham radios and stuff, okay? So I've got to see from operating system when you had to write your operating system into, the Simtel 20 and missile range. And operating the first, I was that guy, right? So I kind of grew up in it. And so when I look at evolution of metal to software, if you can connect the parsers to the programming language to create an operating system, to the device drivers, to a protocol to communicate through air to something else, you can also reverse engineer that to design very interesting filters and ways to look at signals. So I think we're at a world right now so what I didn't say and Anu didn't mention was last time I came back out of retirement, I spent a little bit of time with John Chambers at Cisco and back. And traveled around the world to tell everybody that there's $9 trillion of the value at stake because of Internet of Things and Internet of Everything. So we went around and gave governments billions of dollars and they created Cisco University. And that, I thought it would be 2 years of coming back out and having some fun to change the notion of silicon to address the real problem was this Metcalfe's and Moore's law in Wall Street, where high frequency trading and algorithmic trading was, pretty much eating away of the capital sector and the infrastructure and the order books. But, you had to know how to bridge the two. So, when you come out of that kind of environment, then you can look at economics and look at the economic theory and transaction costs. And nobody talks about that. So, we've entered the DeFi stage about 4 months ago. We came in as a liquidity provider, did the global first liquidity generation event, and before that, 4 years ago, we created the first, stable currency that's asset backed for 15 countries in Africa, but no one would ever know, right? So that's how we innovate, right? And now we came out, stuck our necks out, and then obviously coming out to play with Anu, she exposed us all of our unmasked shit. And now we have, everybody and their mother,
That's the sensei that got me started. You know this, Dan. You know this.
I know. It's like
4 years ago.
There's only so much you could take. And then on the other side, we got guys like Brian, who's part of our tribe. And, we got fast cycle innovation around how we can. So the issue, I think the challenge for all of us is not how do we sift through data. And I think this is a challenge I take on, but I'm encouraging guys to think about it with me, is how do we design the next generation instrumentation and sensors, okay? Because we've had, at least in my life, 30 years of people scanning my brains, and I can name all the guys Dan and others know, okay? And they can't tell me shit about how I think. And if they can't do that, they must have some super powers to give me some artificial intelligence, because some people actually think I'm intelligent, right? But I don't. But doesn't mean, it can't be verified, right?
Oh.
What the best folks I've met in the AI world, and that's my point, is folks who came out of signals analysis and electrical engineering, okay? And not cognitive reasoning, not neurosciences, not computer science. So I think sometimes we have to change the context of the problem. Maybe we'll get to the same answer. But Dan, I'm pretty well read on some of the stuff I've kind of lived the evolution of what you've been doing. I think that will happen. I'm any way I can help on that, right? I just think I get a little bit.
We're going to have a jam session here. Next week, we're going to have a jam session. It's already on the books.
Brian, have to do that.
But I'd love to hear Brian's take, because I think during the pandemic, one of the greatest things I saw happen in this area of empathy is Brian built a virtual himself, okay, as a character that knows how to apply that same technology of voice, cadence, data, and can talk to himself like his mini me. Come on, Brian, give us a little look-see or some.
Can you show Sophie, Brian? Can you bring Sophie on the screen now? Is that possible?
No, we're doing something right now with her. But listen, Aaron, I wanted to go back to your points. And Dan, thank you very much for the contributions that you're making, right, to kind of building the infrastructure and the framework for people like me to connect to, right? Because once you start to break down the walls and allow that, yeah, same here. I'm dyslexic, so I can't do that with my right hand.
No.
It's being able to open up frameworks for developers to create magic, okay? And the innovation that goes on with that needs visionaries behind it. They need to be able to think way beyond the current status quo and how we are just one, a bit away from everybody else. We're all connected. Secure data becomes that gateway now. And if we go back to some of the attempts at marketing by some of the large Fortune 10 companies like Microsoft and Google and stuff like that, in terms of their visions for the future, you'd think that it was created in a Hollywood basement, but it's not. It was created in code, and it's created in connectivity to be able to eliminate any kind of friction between systems and create seamless environments. Once you start to apply that to the communication level protocol that decentralized apps provide, we will start thinking about the world of blockchain in a much different way.
Yeah.
Right? And it is about secure data and pushing that data across, having trustless environments that we can not only feel safe, but can literally trust the information that we are accessing at the end of the day. And look, I'm always looking for practical ways of being able to articulate this technology. Some of it is amplification, putting companies on display, but we have such an incredible environment of innovation that's going on right now.
Yeah.
Data is, again, showing itself as the true natural resource, right? There's an overabundance of it. A lot of it's static. And if you can figure out how to connect with people, both on an empathetic level, which again goes back to design, right? What are you designing at the end of the day? We take for granted today that, applications, even as complex as Robinhood, right? And the Reddits of the world, in how consensus can be created in one form or another that is creating direction. We're in a very powerful position that we need to employ responsibility across our design level, right? And that, again, establishes more standards for developers now to be able to build across a global standard of ethics, right, that need to be applied. And not that I want to employ any more standardization to things that don't need to be standardized. The blockchain, as standardized as it is, wouldn't have happened if people didn't go out there to break rules, right? To change the status quo, to change the environments that we're in. So I'm really super excited. I never really thought of myself in the AI space, even though I've been working with data and automation for 20 years. I was always thinking about, from a technician's perspective, how do you get a person from point A to point B and back safely and quickly and efficiently with no friction? That's the segue for the next visitor. No, I'm just kidding. We do another 30 seconds. Plato. It's Plato.
So, Brian,
PlatoAIstream.net. I put the link up there. You guys can play around it with it. It's been in development. This particular instance has been development only 4 months because we knew what we were doing after going through 3.5 years of interface design and trying to understand where the market was going. We're about data. We're about vertical marketplaces and creating connectivity to those marketplaces, establish authenticity. And I think that is the one thing that artificial intelligence, the successful use cases are all authentic. They're doing something efficiently and they're creating, again, a two-way conversation that's going on between you and your local bot.
Ben, do you have something to say, or before, do you want? I don't want to speak again before. So
your tech and how you've introduced empathy and AI in your tech, the one that you're building right now.
Who, me?
Yes.
Well, okay. So the company I was working with, Sensum, sadly sort of didn't survive the COVID slowdown. So I'm in the kind of like beautiful, terrifying free fall stage at the moment of figuring out what the next project is and getting a few things going. So you can check out Sensum, and there's loads of stuff on YouTube, and on hopefully I don't know if the old website's still up, but what I will do though is pick up on a sort of point and quite a general level. But Brian was talking about design there. I think that I agree that I think these are design challenges more than people realize. Like it's, even if you have a really, really simple kind of smart system, how you actually interface that, make it useful for people is kind of more interesting than the actual, underlying technology in many ways, and because that's where the real value comes from. But also, I think something that is kind of interesting is that all of business and all of design ultimately is an empathic process, right? It's about trying to understand how another person thinks and feels and then respond to that in an appropriate way. So if people can figure out systems that have some kind of empathic feedback loop between a system and a person, or between people and people, facilitated by the system, then business and good services and stuff like that can fall off the back of it, because ultimately all you're doing is you're getting into the heart of how people feel and responding to them appropriately. And that's what we'd refer to as a very empathic person. We might say that they have high charisma, or they're very funny, or they're a good leader, or they're very coercive because they know how to respond to somebody's feelings in an appropriate way. So I don't know, it's a very general point.
I just, to all that, I just want to add, especially taking it to the point where Dan talked about abundance. And yes, we discovered abundance with agriculture, but then we discovered greed. And with greed, we introduced scarcity. With scarcity, and it's at the basics, we still are we use scarcity as the way we anchor and measure, but there's only one scarcity in life, and that is life itself. And we need to redirect, I think, our economic models and our thinking from domination, from accumulation, from a vertical wealth accumulation, say, to horizontal wealth creation and enablement. And I know you have Rian Eisler on your list of speakers, and she talks a lot about partnerism. But in fact, we can apply all the technology, we can put all the regulations, we can make all the standards we want. And standards really, for me, I work on standards and I volunteer my time for standards because it's important to find ways to come to ways that we can commonly understand each other, and that we can drive a collaborative innovation, common language, common terminology. But it is really important to move our mindset, our socioeconomic and geopolitical drivers from extraction-based to an expansive, as you were describing, Dan, about the abundance. In fact, there is abundance. The only scarcity is your own time, which is what we squander, being in a state of sacrifice, fear, suffering, pain, when in reality, we have all that it takes to live in abundance. I invite you, I invite us all to use Brian's platform so we can. Hey, I'm trying to see if you're paying attention there, Brian. But in seriousness, I think this is a tremendous opportunity to disrupt the trajectory of humanity, and in fact, AI as a tool for improving to augment our own intelligence and our decision making, it is being implemented and is being used at every aspect of life, up and down the stack. Whether it's in the embedded, whether it's in the design of the chipsets, whether in the way the chipsets are working within each other, whether in the processors on a chip working with each other so they can facilitate deep learning better, or so that we are using AI inside of AI to to improve our capacity. So we have to change our intent.
Anu, I just I've known Lubna for a few years now. And
you have? You've known each other?
Yes, well.
I'm shameful. I owe him a visit. That's why I'm going to go into the city tomorrow and be on his door. Please let me in.
Yeah, Dan and Ben, and of course Aaron, and you, Anu, which again has been the connective tissue here on this particular event, which is really interesting when people from quite different vantage points are looking at the same thing. And that's what kind of makes AI beautiful, right? Is when AI can start to teach itself and train itself along the guidelines and the trajectory that it was intended to be used for. So there's a visionary approach here that, I hope you guys all take home to your local efforts, because we're on the cutting edge of everything we can think about, which is about network convergence here. Okay, and really building a better planet. These new economies, Dan, that you mentioned, right? This is a completely new reality. There's a new game in town, and it's accelerating at such a fast pace that even network capacity is trying to figure out which path to go to on the silicon layer, right? To be able to kind of deliver all of this. And right now we're at light speed on everything, right? It's step on the gas. Let's, do it and break down all the doors and, eventually, able to distribute that wealth, right? And the resources across there.
Build bridges.
Hey?
Yeah, I said break down the walls, build bridges.
Building bridges, okay.
So you were all
tunnel architecture.
I know each of you separately, except Ben, you've just come into my universe. You're part of your new addition to the tribe. No one sleeps. None of you sleep. No one sleeps, and everybody's moving at light speed. This is the path of the digital Jedi, and there's others of us on this path. And again, we're re-architecting the trajectory of humanity. And I urge all of you listening today, whether you're live here today or listening to the recording, this is a space that you need to pay close attention to, because ultimately it's going to transform the way we all live, work, think, and most importantly, connect the bottom 2 billion that are currently not addressed, that are marginalized, that are neglected. And again, whether it's through digital identity, self-sovereignty, again, protecting your own data, like how that will work through spatial web and other modalities. But it's amazing how much tech is coming at one time. And again, this little room, we can see how many synergies there are, and the amplifier. And I've always said artificial intelligence plus blockchain equals impact to the infinity power. That's my own mathematical equation for everything. Like I say this, it's right. So it's ultimately, we can only go so far with blockchain, merge that AI, got to get the Jedis in there. So wherever we are, find the compassionate Jedis and let's go. And we're going to get this done.
It's compassion. It's highlighting compassion as an emotion.
100%.
That's what we need to have empathy and to understand each other's 100%. Emotion. And where our point A is, if it's not coming from a place from a compassionate point A in your own self and in the systems you create, it is a very dangerous tool, because it really is very double-edged. Right. But it's wonderful to see so many, and thank you, Anu, for bringing so many people together because it will take scale to make the difference and to tip us. It's the scale in terms of the thinking. 100%. To a horizontal wealth creation, to realize that it doesn't matter how big your boat is, it's how many people you can get on that damn boat so you can have a good time.
Absolutely.
It's not how many people you're richer than, but it's how many people have you enabled to be to enable others for prosperity, sustainable prosperity and well-being. Then we can reach. Just imagine if it's how many laughs you've inflicted, how much joy. Get out of here. The world, the life is the only scarcity. We should be all having a damn party and having a great time, innovating and how to get to space and beyond, and not sitting here killing each other, being so silly. So I'm coming I'm coming over for at least
You're coming to Bermuda. Amen, sister. Amen, sister. And thank you for being the inspiration to this panel. And
thank you.
And Dan, from that very first email that I sent you, the Jedi luncheon that we had.
Live long and prosper.
Yeah, totally. Live long and prosper. And Erin, the mentor that you are, like how embedded you are. Yes. And Brian, for all your support. And Ben, we welcome you today and hope to build this conversation further. And there'll be many more conversations from the people in this room. And starting next week, we'll have our powwow with Dan and Erin. And Brian, you and I talk every day almost, so great. And then Lubna, we shall continue this and build a bigger panel next time, like a more deeper conversation. Lubna had tons of content for this summit. I just couldn't handle it because I was here on this island and had a lot of other things to deal with. But we're going to build this conversation and would love to have you all back and embedded in the conversation on how to build this forward. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Anu. Really great gathering. Great meeting you all. We'll see you down the trail.
See you
so much love. Bye, everyone. Namaste.
Namaste.